One of the most common questions I get all the time is how much money am I going to actually need to purchase this home? Well, in today's video, we're going to be going over how one of my clients, and actually many of my clients, have been able to come to the table with little to no money down. So be sure to stick around to the end of this video. You're not going to want to miss this one. Okay, so how did one of my clients actually come to the table with no money down? Well, there's a few components, and you want to be sure to stick around to the end of the video, because if you miss one of these, you are not going to be able to get the same result. So one of the first things that she did and that I advised her to do was look into new construction homes. Why? Because whenever you're working with a new construction home, no matter whether you're buying new or used, you're gonna have fixed costs, which are also known as your closing costs. So your closing costs usually range anywhere from 2 to 4%, right? But when you're working with a new construction home, they have what's called a preferred lender, right? Preferred banks that they like to work with. So if you as a buyer choose to work with one of these banks that is one of their preferred lenders, a lot of the times they will cover all of your closing costs. So if they say, hey, you know, we prefer to work with, you know, X, Y, and Z bank, and you get your financing through one of these banks, they will cover that 2 to 4% that normally would come out of your pocket, okay? So that was the first thing we did, right? She was pre-qualified with another lender, and essentially we, you know, asked them who their preferred lenders were. I had worked with several of them in the past, so I said, you know what, I've worked with this person in the past, I know them, I trust them. So we went ahead and switched them over, okay? So that was the first step, right? We switched them over, and now she didn't have to worry about her closing costs, but that still left her down payment, right? And her down payment, she was gonna be a first-time home buyer. She was using an FHA loan, which have lower down payments. So her down payment was only gonna be 3.5%, right? But the house that she's buying is over $200,000, so it was still a substantial amount. Now, one of the other things that allowed her to not have to pay her down payment up front was a special program called DPA, or Down Payment Assistance. So this program is typically for lower income families, and I say lower, but you know, I think the regulation states that it has to be under about $75,000, which is still a pretty decent income in this area. You know, so if you make more than $75,000, I don't believe you qualify, but definitely if you have a question, comment it down below and I'll reach out to you personally, because these things are constantly changing. But anyways, she did qualify for the program, and that was one of the things that allowed her to now not worry about her down payment, because essentially what the program does is it takes her down payment and it rolls it into her loan. That way she's financing it and she's not having to pay it up front. Okay, so that program basically allowed her to get rid of her down payment. Now, she was also part Native American. So because she was part of a tribe, this tribe had this special program that allowed her to essentially have access to funds that could help with, you know, home inspections, appraisals, closing costs, down payment, I mean, whatever she needed it for, right? And the only other cost that she was gonna have other than her closing costs and down payment was gonna be her home inspection and her appraisal. So essentially her home inspection, once the house is complete and, you know, ready to move in, the first thing that she's gonna wanna do is have the home professionally inspected, because, you know, to the untrained eye, it may look completely perfect, but to a professional home inspector, they're gonna be able to point out things that the average Joe might not see. So she went ahead and booked the home inspection. That cost her about $250, but, you know, it is well worth it, giving her the peace of mind that the quality of home that she's getting is what it says it is, and, you know, things just don't look good on the surface, and, you know, everything, you know, plumbing, electrical, roofing, foundation, and all those things are also in check, because as you can imagine, you know, buying, you know, a new home, especially for the first time, it could actually be, you know, very stressful, right? So that was the one thing. That was one of the things. The other thing that she had was her appraisal. So the appraisal, if you're not familiar with it, essentially what it is let's say, you know, I'm the buyer and I'm working with a bank who's gonna help me finance the purchase of my home. So what happens is I say, okay, great, I found this home, I wanna buy it. It's $200,000, I get it under contract, and then I submit that contract. Well, the realtor does this, right? But anyways, the contract gets to the loan officer, And at a certain point in the transaction, you know, it's different for new builds and resales, but at a certain point in the transaction, they're gonna order the appraisal. And essentially what that appraisal is the bank sends somebody to the house to essentially value the property. And the reason for that is because the bank doesn't wanna lend you $300,000 if the home is only worth $250,000. And this is a very, very common issue and something that could arise, you know, problems if you aren't careful or know how to manage with these situations. So it's very, very important because the bank needs to know that they're not over lending you and could essentially create, you know, trouble down the road. So the bank sends someone out and they go ahead and value the home, and if everything checks out, you know, you're buying the home for $250,000, the appraiser comes back to the bank and says, yeah, you know, it's all there, it's worth $250,000, then you're good to go. And that is something that typically you have to pay out of pocket, and in our area right now they're running anywhere from $600 to $700. But in some cases I have seen it where they can actually pay it at closing. So the appraisal typically is ordered, in this market, usually about a month or so before you actually close. But in some cases, the lender will pretty much absorb that charge for now, and then you will be charged, you know, at closing, which essentially could be a month later, right? So essentially those were going to be her only two expenses, right? The inspection and the appraisal. But because she was part of this tribe, like I was saying, you know, she did have access to these funds that she could simply take, and she didn't have to pay them back, and literally no money down at the transaction. But you know, because it was so little, I think all in all it was less than $1,000. She didn't want to take the funds away from the tribe because that's money that, you know, somebody else could have, you know, needed more than her. So she went ahead and just said, you know, that's fine, I'm not going to go ahead and, you know, take the tribal program on top of everything. I'll just pay those expenses out of pocket. And yeah, that's how she did it. Okay, so to recap, the builder was covering her closing costs because she was using the premier lender, and then her down payment was being covered and financed by the down payment assistance program, right? And on top of that, she did have other minor expenses, but I mean, compared to what she would have paid if she had to pay her full closing costs and had to pay her full down payment, I mean, they don't even compare. Let me actually run the numbers for you. Okay, so let's just say she was buying a $200,000 house, right, for argument's sake. So it's $200K. Her down payment would have been 3.5%, which would have been $7,000. And then she would have had her closing costs, which would have been, let's just say, another 3%. So 200,000 times 3%, that's $6,000. So 6 plus $7,000 brings us to $13,000 on top of her appraisal and her inspection. So, you know, almost, let's just say $14,000 compared to $1,000, and could have potentially been zero. I mean, it is a huge, staggering difference. And a lot of people, I mean, if you ask them right now, hey, do you have 14 grand to shell out on a brand new home? In most cases, you know, the answer would probably be no on, you know, a moment's notice. Or, you know, would they be able to accumulate those funds within, you know, the time frame that the home would be ready? I mean, in a lot of cases, it's not possible, right? So in this case, it really helped her out. You know, in most cases, $1,000 by the time the home's complete, or, you know, you're going through the whole contract, which usually just the contract alone is taking you 30 to 45 days, not including build time. So in her case, the home wasn't ready yet. So she had about 4 or 5 months to come up with, you know, the money. So that was plenty of time. She had the money right offhand, so she really didn't even have to wait. Now it was just a matter of, you know, getting everything done, getting the transaction settled. And yeah, that's how she did it. Quick tip for everybody who's still watching, you can actually also do this with a VA loan. So if you are military, first of all, thank you so much for your service. And the way you do it is actually, you know, as I'm sure you're aware, or maybe you're not aware, is that, you know, when you're buying a home and you use a VA loan, your down payment gets rolled into the loan, similar with the down payment assistance program. And if you're doing new construction, you know, if you go with the preferred lender, most of the time they're going to cover most, if not all, of your closing costs. Now, if you're buying a resale home because you want a little bit more bang for your buck, it's completely understandable. The only thing I would mention is that due to current market circumstances, the majority of homes you know, the majority of sellers, I should say, aren't really willing to pay a whole lot of closing costs. There are, you know, certain homes that are, and it just depends, right? It depends on things like the price, how long they've been on market, you know, the situation of the seller. So there's always that possibility. I'm not saying it can't be done, but I just wanted to make you guys aware of your options and current market conditions as of, you know, late mid 2021 essentially. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video or found it helpful in any way, shape, or form, be sure to hit that like button. It really helps me out a ton and helps send this video out to more people like you looking for this kind of information. Also, if you're not subscribed yet, go ahead and consider subscribing. It is for free, and you can always change your mind later. And if you want to stay up to date with everything, the latest and greatest, be sure to hit that bell notification and turn post notifications on. That way you never miss a video and you stay ahead of the trend, because in this market, you will need it. Thanks so much for watching.